People start rolling. All right. Thanks, participants, for joining. I see people rolling in. Sorry for getting started a minute late. Very typical when it comes to me. Getting started on time is not quite my thing. So got to grow a couple of great panelists here for everybody today, and in a very interesting topic. So see people rolling in, appreciate it. And we're going to jump right into it here. So hey, everybody, Jason Beck and a group of panelists here to talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity in retail energy and beyond today. Very excited to have my co-host and partner in crime, Joseph Monroy, on the call today, giving you a little bit of his perspective. He's always behind the scenes showcasing some great things, but a near and dear topic to his heart, and we're excited to bring this to everybody today. Agenda for today is going to be housekeeping. Going to let Joe share with you guys any on the panelists, the participant side, if there's anything that is needed. Panelist intros, got a couple of great questions, and please, as always, make it incredibly interactive. We want to hear from you. And so, Joe, lead us through what we typically do in our housekeeping.
All righty. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending and RSVPing. My name is Joe Monroy. I'm the marketing coordinator here at Enerex. And so webinar housekeeping, we really do want you to engage. We enabled the Q&A functionality. You can upvote people's questions, comment on other questions, but just note that all questions will be visible to all attendees. You can also chat with the hosts and panelists private. This will only be visible to the panelists as well if you want to ask us private questions. And you can also follow up with Enerex at the call. We are at Enerex platform on LinkedIn, Twitter, and our website as well. If you have any questions whatsoever, you can shoot me an email at joseph.monroy@enerex.com, and I can help you with video issues, sound issues whatsoever. I'll drop my email in the chat as well. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Joe. Really do appreciate that. And, special thanks to TEPA here. TEPA is an organization, and this is a strange one. We do this all the time, Shannon, but first time we've actually had you on the call when we're doing this. TEPA is an organization that supports retail energy as large brokers and suppliers and affiliates like us, Enerex, a software company to the industry. And we're going to be at the TEPA event August 25th in Chicago, and see you all there. So really appreciate TEPA and all that they do. So today, what are you going to learn on this webinar? We're going to first inform you what is DE&I, hot topic in our society today. And so just learning a little bit more about what it is, best practices. Joe has reached out to a couple of firms that we believe has incredible best practices, and EDPR. Two folks are on the call today. We'll share those interesting perspectives. And then what are things going on in retail energy around diversity, equity, inclusion, both from the sales side of how to serve markets, and that's what David Chang is on the line for, and then Shannon McGriff in terms of women in energy and really promoting that group. So that is what we are going to learn today. Why is Enerex bringing this to you? That might be a question for the audience, right? We're a software company. Why are you talking about DE&I? We're talking about it today because retail energy, our goal as Enerex is connecting people. These are our products real quick. Don't have to go through them, just sharing. We have a lot of products for retail energy. But our purpose, connecting people through technology to increase trust in retail energy markets. This one's really focused on the first part. This webinar is really focused on the first part of our purpose and mission statement. It's about connecting people. And people are incredibly diverse by nature. Different backgrounds, different socioeconomic statuses, different thought processes and perspectives. And what does that mean, for the future of retail energy? We're an industry that was born out of the utility industry. That comes with a certain set of people that were in that industry and that have migrated to our industry. So what does that mean, for the future of our industry, and really focused on that idea of connecting people? With that, I am going to start by introducing some of our panelists and letting them speak a little bit about themselves. David Chang, industry savant, has been around retail energy for 15 years, roughly, right? Just like me, and has recently started with EIQhome. So David, give us a little brief introduction on yourself.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Jason and team, thanks for putting this together. My name is David Chang, and as Jason put it, I have been in the retail industry for the last 15 years. Yes. So my focus in the last 15 years has been primarily in driving digital transformation for retail energy company, some of the largest retail energy company in the country. As Jason put it, as a software company, our mission is about connecting people, and the people come from all walk of life. And we believe that, especially, me being a first generation immigrant in the country, there are some interesting story and that I can share with the group, and hopefully, I can benefit the audience and welcome any questions that anybody might have. So that's a little bit about me. Back to you, Jason.
Thanks so much, David. And EIQhome, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but that is the firm that you're working with, and we'll talk a little bit more about it during the course of the presentation. So just moving back here with EDP, we have two fantastic representatives from EDP, both Lynn George, who is the owner and operator of the DE&I program at EDP. If you have not checked out the website for EDP Renewables and you're on this call, you should right now while we're doing this on your second screen. A fantastic focus on DE&I. And Lynn, please tell us a little bit more about your background and EDP Renewables, and then we'll get on to Jennifer as well.
Thank you, Jason and Joseph, for having us on today's panel. I am excited about being here. My name is Lynn George. My pronouns are she, her. I am responsible for equity, diversity, and inclusion at EDPR North America. A little bit about my background. I have spent 18 years in workforce development, beginning with the one-stop career centers during the Clinton administrations when his emphasis was on welfare reform. And having worked in workforce development, it really afforded me the opportunity to work with people where in workforce development, where their careers was the focus of the work. And this afforded me to really work with them, really have access to work with people from various backgrounds, socioeconomic statuses, ethnicities, learning styles, with an emphasis on really helping them land work. And so my career shifted from that to coaching and learning and development with a focus on ED&I in the last 6 years. And so my passion for career growth and development of underserved communities is the reason I am enthusiastic about this work in DE&I. And so I thank you again for the opportunity to serve on today's panel.
More than our pleasure, and happy to have an expert, Lynn. Such a diverse background. Coming into energy is a unique space. Jen, I'd love you to introduce yourself as being somebody who's have a law background and has been in different industries. You are also a committee member on Lynn's DE initiative within EDP. So would love just a little bit of history on your background and anything you want to share with EDP Renewables.
Sure, thanks, Jason. Good morning. My name's Jennifer Pettineo, and my pronouns are she, her. I am a capital markets consultant with EDPR NA DG. And for those who may not know, we're slightly dissimilar at EDP between Lynn and myself. The DG arm that I work for is the distributed generation arm of EDP that develops commercial and community solar projects across the country. So we are the solar arm of the company. I had a bit of a winding road into renewables. I've been a practicing attorney for about 14 years. I initially started in private practice, mainly commercial law. And then I transitioned as a public servant for the state of Florida, practicing insurance regulatory law. And at the end of that tenure, I served as chief counsel to the insurance consumer advocate for the state of Florida, where I helped make consumer-friendly laws for the insurance buying public. And it was there where I was really kind of exposed to the importance of grid resiliency and sustainability when talking about homeowners insurance claims and the claim mitigation process after a natural disaster like a hurricane. I became more attuned to kind of the importance of renewables as they relate to sustainability and a reliable grid, especially in Florida. And then I decided to shift my practice in 2019 and join a solar developer who was adding projects into the country's grid, running tax and debt equity financings as senior counsel. And then last year, I formed a more permanent home with EDP for a couple of reasons. And I think we'll talk about those today. But the major reason being that I think sustainability as a mission is important, but it's not really the only one I subscribe to. And I don't think you can talk about sustainability as a concept without empowering communities and making a social investment with your customers in the workplace. So that's where kind of my passion into DE&I came into play, and I chose to join EDP because of its mission to include DE&I into every aspect of its business platform. And I really believe it's a social investment well worth taking. So I'm excited to participate on today's panel, and thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, more than my pleasure. And, what an interesting perspective for the audience. We as a retail energy industry focused company, and David and Shannon both being in our side of the industry of energy at large, I thought what an interesting perspective, and we'll talk more about this during our conversation today, whereby can you attract the best talent, right, out there in different industries by having some of these type of programs. And Jennifer, your background and your choice there, a big part of the conversation today. And then I'll go on to Miss McGriff. If those people on the phone don't know you, I think that's the problem, actually. One of the most strong figures within our retail energy industry. Shannon has been around for just as long as I have in retail energy, and has been such a champion for broker and supplier communication through her work in TEPA. I don't want to steal her thunder, but she came to me about 3 years ago, and we were talking about committees and how to get more people involved. And I am fortunate enough to be the head of the technology committee for TEPA. And through that conversation, then Shannon mentioned to me that she's starting this group called Power Women. And getting more folks in retail energy together to realize that diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially for the male-female divide, there's just a crazy amount more males in our industry than females. And so I'll tell you what I do a little later, part of that, but not to steal the thunder, but that's my introduction for Shannon. Please fill in the gaps and tell everybody about why you're here today.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, my name is Shannon McGriff, and as Jason mentioned, I am the executive director of the Energy Professionals Association, which we all call TEPA. TEPA was started back in 2005 as a Texas-based association and has since grown to a national association with just over 150 member organizations representing roughly 10,000 energy professionals across the United States and even in Canada. So TEPA is dedicated to advancing competitive energy markets across the country. We support our membership base and the industry by providing accurate market information, educational meetings and events, forming strategic partnerships, forums for collaboration and networking, and offering some suggested best practices as far as running a business and retail energy goes. Ultimately, we work to advocate in the best interest of the end user at the end of the day. So in late 2019, or maybe it was 18, Jason, I can't remember, we started talking about this idea of getting more people involved within the association and how do we expand our reach, and forming different committees with sub focuses was kind of the logical answer. And so Jason mentioned our technology committee, which he chairs for us, which has done wonders for our industry from an exposure standpoint, as well as providing more content and educational opportunities. I went to the TEPA board and asked for their support to create a new committee within TEPA focused on the development and advancement of women in our industry. Ultimately came up with the name Power Women. It's very hard from a marketing perspective to come up with creative names around energy. So that's where we ended. COVID set us back a little bit on the launch, but we really got going this year with a advisory board being formed, our first board meeting in New York, and we have a networking happy hour we're going to host prior to our Chicago event. But overall, an increased focus on the development of women in all roles in our industry is a logical next step for TEPA and should be a new standard in our industry as a whole.
So true, and I think that it's interesting when it comes to, and we'll talk about this too, it's, what could, look at, I mean, everyone knows, right? White male, I know, he, him, that's my pronouns, right? I know who I am, and yet I still believe in these aspects. And so I think what's interesting is what do other people, right, of more diverse backgrounds than stodgy old white guys like me, suggest for what we should be doing, right, to support this. And I'll tell you a little bit what I think as we get into it, but it's more important, like what do others think, and what can we really do as individuals to support, the promotion of these diverse groups that are working on these things and link the right people up. That's to me what everybody should be doing at minimum, right? You talk to somebody, you understand what their background is, what their motivations are. That's typically part of any type of networking event. And then it should trigger something in your mind and go, oh, you're really interested in this. Great. I know this person who's very interested in this too. And you should link up, because then you're going to advocate and then you're going to do something about it, right? So I'll start off with quickly, we thanks so much, Joe, for putting this together. I think it always start with a baseline. What is DEI? In fact, I think in the prep calls, for what it's worth, I called it EDI, and then we were equity, diversity, and inclusion. We're like, wait a minute, no, EDI means something in energy. No, this is actually DEI. And it starts with the D of diversity, right? It is that fact that there are a presence of multiple different characteristics that make up an individual. It's not just race, it's not just sex, it's not just religion, it's not just sexual orientation, it's the combination of those things. And that, excuse me, should make everyone realize that an individual is an individual, right? You can be part of different categories, but what makes you up is unique. Your diverse experiences in life and your background, that is what I mean by diversity. Excuse me, coughing on myself here. Equity, reflecting the process of identifying and removing the barriers, right, that create these disparities. So that's in your hiring practices. That's in your conversations with individuals, right? Your expectations should be equal, regardless of any of these other things that make up somebody's background. And then the inclusion aspect is, covering these, creating environments in which any group or individual can feel welcome, respected, et cetera. This is something we'll talk a lot more in depth about, because Joe and I have had these conversations as well, which is, at the end of the day, I want to, as an individual, feel that there is no sense, right, of any differences based on what my diverse background is. It's all based on that. So again, that's my take on it. It's a layman's take on it. I don't have these backgrounds of these individual people. And that's when I turn it over to, okay, those are definitions of DEI. It sets the benchmark. And so I am going to kick it over now to the panelists here to talk about our first question today, which is, what does DEI mean to you? I'm going to start off with Lynn on this question, just kind of defining what it means to her with her diverse background, and then kicking it over to Jennifer to provide that perspective of an employee, where it's very important, right? Somebody who runs a program and has best practices, and somebody who chose a company, right, because of these practices. So Lynn, please, what does DEI mean to you?
Awesome question. So, having been raised by immigrant parents that came into this country in the 70s, and even though I was born here, I noticed as a young girl that I was different, because I came up in a culture that was different from when I left home into school. Immediately, I recognized that what the norms and behaviors that I was experiencing as a child and what I grew up to believe was very different from what I was experiencing outside of the home. And so diversity is inherent in all of us. It is the combination of the different dimensions of diversity that makes up who we are. And it ensures that we at EDP, we ensure that we accept people from all backgrounds and walks of life, valuing each other's skills and the values that they bring to the table. So diversity is who we are as people. Over to you, Jennifer.
I was on mute, sorry, but yes,
Oh.
Same. Thank you, Lynn, doing my job for me. I love it. Lynn, yeah, definitely. Jennifer, over to you on terms of that. What does it mean to you? And tell us a little bit about, why choosing EDP for the next stage of your career.
Yeah, sure. So DEI plays obviously a really great and big, necessary, important role in my life. You know, I come from a diverse mix of backgrounds myself. I am a gay, Hispanic woman, and so that's quite a combination of things, and it's played very, you know, centrally in my life, even professionally and personally. There's been a lot of instances where it's, you know, my experiences have created uncomfortableness or even instances of discrimination in both my professional and personal life. So it is great when I have an opportunity to join a company like EDP, where you know, diversity and inclusion and equity is at the core of its mission, is actually a key driver of our business. For me, it's very important. It makes me feel like I can bring my true, authentic self to the workplace, and also feel free to be innovative and be a leader in various aspects of my role, even as a consultant in capital markets, but also in the wider global EDP company as well. My true self is recognized and celebrated, actually, for being who I am and being in the space. So that's truly the way I view it, and why it's so important to me in the workplace specifically.
Jennifer, that's such a great introduction to, you know, to you as a human, and I really do appreciate that. You know, I'll share quickly before going over to David. You know, it's interesting, as I was coming up in the Midwest and through high school, a lot of my friends had gone to Big Ten schools, right? Stayed local, and those who know, you know, the Americas know that the Big Ten schools in the Midwest, that's a lot of local people. And I decided actually to go down to University of Miami in Southern Florida, simply because I was like, wait a minute, I live in an area, first off, I'm Jewish, that's my background, right? And I'll tell you a little bit about that here, you know, quickly. I knew that I grew up in an area that was so dominant with people that were like me. And it's like, that's not the makeup of the world. And so how do you understand and how do you learn? And I think a big part of diversity, equity, inclusion is just being open to learn about different cultures and different people and their backgrounds. And so I actually seeked that out, right, by going and choosing that university. And it was great. I learned so much about the Latin culture that I would never have learned in the Midwest, right? And how diverse the Latin culture is. Similarly to the Asian culture, it's not just, right, there are many different individual from an ethnicity standpoints and some unique characteristics of that as well. And so that's why it's important to me, a little bit of my background. And you talked about that, you know, Jennifer, at certain times feeling, right, in your career like I wasn't being included. In fact, maybe even as far as being discriminated against. And I talk to people about this because that's actually one thing that I can relate to, right? Most white males can't, because they might not have experienced that. I have had anti-Semitic behavior in my life, and it has made me, it's only happened twice. And it's not like you can see it. Somebody would have to know I'm Jewish first to be able to do that. So it's why it has happened to me less frequently. But yet at the same time, I think that understanding of how that feels, because only you can feel something, right? Understanding how that feels, it brings a whole new light. And it's why I'm a little bit more passionate on the subject of DEI. And so, you know, I would love Joe just real quickly to share, you know, why is this so important to you, obviously, as well. You are a marketing coordinator here at Enerex and a savant at your job. I know you're on mute, so before you start talking, unmute yourself. But would love to hear just why is this important to you today?
Yeah. So before I was with Enerex, I attended aid in Corpus Christi. Shout out, go Durs. I was a part of an organization called the Islander Cultural Alliance, whose mission was to make the island, the university was on the island, to make the island an inclusive place, really a home for all. TAMI-CC is a Hispanic serving institution, an HSI. So the main goal of ICA was really to spread inclusivity and kind of an equitable vibe to the entire campus. So that was my job for about 3 to 4 years. And then I jumped into working with Enerex, and I found kind of the intersection of my passions. Like, I love technology, I love talking to people, I love being able to communicate to people, as well as celebrate the differences in the culture, in the industry as well. I'm a queer, indigenous, and Latin American student, South Texas student, Karankawa, and a little bit of Apache as well. So I come from a very, very diverse background and a very low socioeconomic hometown. So I've kind of felt it firsthand. And DEI to me is super important because I think we need to stop compartmentalizing ourselves and stop viewing ourselves as independent aspects and see each other as a whole. And I think that's really where DEI starts.
Thanks, Joe, for sharing that unique perspective. David, what does this mean to you? And also start to drill into the why now. Why is DEI a big topic of conversation within our world as we see it today?
Yeah. No, first I wanted to say that Lynn, when you say diversity is who we are, and Jason, when you mentioned that individual is individual, it just resonated with me very, very strongly. I am a first generation immigrant to this country, as you can imagine. When I came here at age 16, do not say a single word of English. How comfortable I was in high school, right? Think about it. That was a high school age, and I tried very hard at early stage when I was in the U.S. and early stage of my career, try to be somebody who I am not. Try to be quote unquote mainstream, right? And try to be the white people, if you will, right? And never appreciated my own background until later in my career, and especially one of my big mentor, and I think we all know him, Kenny Matula. He told me that just be yourself, right? David, try to be yourself. Let yourself come out, and slowly but maturely, I kind of bring myself out, and the way I think about things, the way I look at things, right? And it is appreciated. And then I kind of start to realize I don't have to be somebody. I can just be who I am, and I can be successful. Try to be who I am, and it was a big turning point in my life, and that's why this topic, in a way, is extremely passionate to me. How many talent do we have in our workforce that if we do not bring out their thought process, their thinking, and who they truly are, what we will be missing out? To me, DE&I is not just the same. To me, it's something I experience. At the end of the day, for business, it's a good old business.
Absolutely, man. Couldn't agree more. And yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate it greatly. Shannon?
Well, I feel like the most underqualified person on this call for sure when it comes to talk about this topic. But what I will say is that when I started in this industry after college, there were very few female leadership positions. There were very few females in leadership roles. And I remember the ones that I met right out of the gate. I could name some of them. One of them, Michelle Robichaud, is serving on our committee, the Power Women Committee. Yeah, there just weren't many. I looked around and it was very male-dominated industry, very male-dominated events. And so I will say I have to give a lot of credit to the males in our industry, because I always was encouraged to continue to work hard and to move up the ladder. I never felt that they weren't supportive. I think we have a really good industry when it comes to that. But I also think it's really nice to have people that you understand what you're going through and you can lean on, and to have mentors and people to counsel with you. And so that was kind of my reasoning for creating this women's group.
That's awesome, Shannon. And this is really just kind of setting the table and background for why we're here today and what it means to these individuals and why they're here. And then the next thing I really wanted to do is give some concrete examples in the industry. What are people doing, and how does equity play into those missions? We heard a little bit from EDP, and I want to go a little bit deeper on that in terms of what does good look like, which we'll get to at another topic of the conversation. But I'll say, David, how does this play into your mission with EIQhome? What are you doing to focus on this equity play?
Yeah, at EIQhome, we see diversity, equity, and inclusion, not only for our own workforce. We see it in the marketplace in a way of how we treat our customers, will help our partner in the retail energy space, providing the capability and technology to engage them, right? And I feel like, again, individual is individual. In the old day, where we don't have the capability to be able to speak to individual in a personalized way, that's changing now. In our mission, we have the data and hyperconnect technology. We are able to render personalized experience to serve some of the underserved community, underprivileged community. So it is very important to us that not only we want to serve the mainstream, but we want to make sure we don't leave everyone behind. And that's the mission of our at EIQ. We do that specifically with two approach. Everything we do in terms of a technology design, we want to make sure it can be consumed by people from all walks of life in terms of language, in terms of dynamic rendering and whatnot, right? And then the way we go to market, we want to be able to speak to the people who may come to this country, into the Texas for the first time, do not understand English. How do we get information about, retail energy to them and get them, treated well? So again, the equity and inclusion and diversity is a huge part of our mission, and we are trying to do so, extending that through the technology that we are building.
That's such an important part, David. I think in our industry, typically in Texas rules, for those of us who know retail energy, you have to have information in both Spanish and English. Well, there are a heck of a lot of people in Houston, and trust me, I know a lot of them, that they don't speak either of those two languages at all. You have a very large Asian population and many different ethnicities within that Asian population, including the Indian population as well in that Asian population, right? And these are all communities that might be quote unquote underserved because no marketer is actually putting it in their language and giving the information and making those parallels, right? Drawing metaphors based on things that folks are going to understand. So David, really excited for what you're doing in that play. And obviously, as we know, EDP, right, as they both talked about, Jennifer and Lynn, this is a huge part of their overall mission. I urge everybody to go to their website. Shannon, in terms of TEPA, how do you feel that equity plays into the mission of TEPA? TEPA is an association, right, for multiple people. We do have power women, which is great. How does overall equity play into the mission of TEPA?
That's a good question. And it's a hard one for me to answer as the representative of TEPA as a whole, right? Because since we're a membership-based group, we have 150 membership companies. And so TEPA just wants to be a resource for our members to come to ask questions, to get information, to gain knowledge, and quite honestly, to meet people like my fellow panelists, right? I'm sure that I'm going to get a lot of contacts from people that are going to reach out and say, hey, can you connect me with this person? I'd like to learn more about what they're doing and how my company can implement some of the strategies like my fellow panelists have been able to do. And so a big part of my job, or what I find to be a big part of my job and my value, is connecting the people that know way more than me with the people that are wanting to learn from them.
That's so true, Shannon. I see that the same way from the Enerex perspective. We have a diverse set of customers as well. And this goes, by the way, Louis, thank you so much for your question. I've seen it, going to answer it. Just next question actually is when we'll get to that. But, from a standpoint of Enerex, equity, all of our hiring practices, right? How we look at, different candidates, all of those things we put into place, but yet, because of the diverse set of customers that we have, taking a stance sometimes is a little difficult, right? You don't want to exclude certain people's perspectives just by taking a proactive, full stance on something. And that's some balance that I think that us in retail energy, I think certain companies are still trying to figure out, right? Where EDP has really taken a forward stance on this. And so, when I've looked at I'll first give a bunch of credits to Joe. Joe is the one who reached out to his network and found the folks at EDP, who introduced us to Lynn and Jennifer. And then as I had the unique capability of learning more about EDP and speaking to both of these individuals before this call, I said, oh, wow, when you talk about a full-blown program and what I would consider great in DEI practices to look like, EDP is a shining example, and Jennifer, kudos to you too on the board. So I'm going to throw this question over to them. What would you say is minimum viable, right, practices that you believe all companies should be doing? And then how does EDP take those MVP DEI practices and go a level above?
Well, at EDP being the leader in the energy transition, we want to make sure that we foster a culture of equity, inclusion, and a sense of belonging by promoting this mindset in a manner in which we treat and welcome our people by encouraging our partners, our stakeholders and clients and communities to foster this intersectionality. So at EDP, we recognize that everyone doesn't start at the same place, and that's the equity part of it. So we make a very genuine commitment to support each employee and take into account what their specific needs are in order to fuel their growth and bring their best selves to the table. So for example, when we develop our learning and development programs, we're considering many factors. We're looking at native languages because we are made up of over 20 nationalities and multiple languages spoken by our employees. So we need to make sure that we need to look at that factor when we're developing programs. We're looking at timing because we are a global company, as well as making sure that we are addressing those needs of individuals that may need more time. We're also we can look at different ways of learning the material. So these are the factors that we look at. One of the most recent programs that we just implemented was Toastmasters, because they have a DE&I focus. And so when you think about what a company needs to do is really when you're developing programs, your hiring practices need to make sure that the people are at the core of the business. And so we've come up with a Toastmasters program that is a learn by doing, and it's focused on leadership and communication because all of our employees have different career journeys and they have different starts. And so that's just one of the examples of how we've incorporated equity into our culture and making sure that we are addressing the needs of our employees and making sure that we're seen as, we're not just seeing, but we're promoting diversity and we understand what that means.
It's huge. And then obviously that attracts best in class talent, right, to your organization because you are inclusive. That's where Jennifer came on. A couple of points to reiterate that, I heard Lynn make, right? Learning and development, that's key, right? So having those programs, if those who don't know what Toastmasters is, it's a program I never went through. And if those who know me, they know why, because Toastmasters is something that I would be more than happy to lead an example of. I love public speaking, but it is a group that many of employees at AEP, when I worked there, I had sent through that program. We had a Toastmasters at AEP as well, because again, imagine, David, Toastmasters, by the way, it's a public speaking forum where it's a group that's getting together and trying to promote each other and give each other real life experiences on how to be more comfortable in public speaking. And public speaking in any one-on-one is public speaking. It doesn't have to be to a group of 400. That's where you eventually want to get to, but it starts smaller than that. And David, what an amazing program that would have been, right? In high school for you, based on your background, right? And having a group to kind of try and fail with, right? And get more comfortable with. So kudos, obviously, EDP. I think that's a great example with the Toastmasters. One thing I did want to though highlight, I didn't hear too much of, and maybe Jennifer, you can talk about this because, something attracted you to probably the website and et cetera with EDP, but talk a little bit about the hiring process, right? At EDP. I believe that a hiring process is part of what I would consider MVP. This is something Enerex does, obviously within our culture to be incredibly inclusive. We have people in 4 different continents working for Enerex that are Enerexers, and we have a very diverse set of backgrounds and cultures. I love learning about different cultures and like that. But what through that hiring process would you say not only attracted you to EDP, but also what you would consider to be best in class or at least minimum viable practices?
Sure. Well, I definitely am not in charge of the hiring process at ADP, but I did go through the process itself as an employee. So I can tell you, it's just about creating the right environment, right? When people enjoy coming to work and they have great outcomes, they share with others about their experiences. And then for me in my hiring process, it was about a referral. It was a previous coworker of mine that had worked with me before, and they went to EDP and just really enjoyed the experience and the environment, and it's worked, in concrete ways where employees have recruited other employees to come work for the company. And I think that's, when you talk about best in class, I mean, you don't have to do much in terms of your hiring processes when you have the employees of the company reaching out to other potential employees and saying, hey, this is a safe space and we're doing really awesome things here. So that's what my experience was. And so I think you had another question about what other companies should do or take a look at with respect to DE&I. And I think for us, and I think in general, like for DE&I, it varies from organization to organization. For us, we have a very obviously high commitment to DE&I, and we want to make sure that people feel like they belong and they're able to contribute. Our slogan at EDP is changing tomorrow now. And I think that means a couple of things in terms of sustainability. And also what I mentioned earlier was a commitment to social impact, because we're changing tomorrow in a lot of ways, more than one. So, for some companies, their ideas of DE&I may be different, and there's different metrics involved and different people involved. But for other companies, DEI could just mean transparency and communication from the company and leadership on their commitment to DE&I. Like you mentioned before, intentional hiring practices. At Enerex, that may look different to what it looks like in for EDP. And like as Lynn mentioned, learning and development programs are kind of poised to promote internal candidates and to what David said, not leave anybody behind. I think that was rang really true to me.
Yes, that's it. If I may, I wanted to interject there for a second, because I think that this is an interesting topic that to dive deeper into. You talked about the stark contrast whereby at EDP, somebody said to Jennifer, who knew about EDP, and Jennifer didn't know about EDP, who knew Jennifer as a person, and said, I think that these values might really align. That's where people, right, will actually just be so excited about the work. That's when you get true performance, right? So and that doesn't matter what the mission is, right? The person working there needs to match the mission of the company. The company is a person, right? The company is its own entity. Legally, it is its own entity, and we should treat it as such. And so that has its own, perspective, mission, vision, values, et cetera, and that attracts certain talent. Now, then you also have at least these minimum viable standard products. And Lynn, I think a common example that most people know about is what the NFL, right, in coaching decisions does about it. And I'm curious at this topic, because when we talk about hiring, right, do you think a company should actually have to interview a multiple diverse set of candidates, right, throughout the process to kind of gain that sense of what the right fit for the job is back on personality? Or does it boil down to that age-old, don't even view any of those diversity things? You don't have to, right? What is minimum viable? I'm curious at your thoughts on that, just as a leader in the space.
So I'm going to answer it this way. I think when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, if hiring a diverse workforce, you have to be intentional, right? And I'll use this example. There's one of our managers, when you present candidates to him, he will look at the candidates and ask, well, who else is in the pipeline? And that's really to ensure that we, number one, we're not just looking to hire for fit, but we're looking to hire for culture give. What are the candidates in that pipeline? What are they able to contribute? And one thing that I like about, and I don't own the hiring process, but one thing that I am privy to and know of our hiring process is that we don't just look at traditional methods of hiring, for instance, matching skills, but what about looking at transferable skills? What about looking at things differently? Because then you get into this individual can give to what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And so when it comes to hiring, it's there's so much research out there about hiring for culture fit versus culture give. And so I think that makes a difference.
Yeah, and managers who are the hiring managers and the people that are making those decisions, they really need to understand that it's not just about job fit, right? It's about more than that. It's about how do you construct a team? And sometimes when you construct a team, and not sometimes, in all times in my experience, actually, because that's all I can speak to is my perspective, but in all times that I've had diverse teams versus non-diverse teams, we've accomplished more just because we have different perspectives and bring unique skill sets to the table.
Jason,
now,
I just want to add to your
please.
point, what you just said, and there's also research out there about, having a diverse team, an inclusive team, and how that is more likely to financially outperform their peers. And so that's something to consider as well.
Please, and share that with the group if there are any research. I think that's a big thing, right? It's you even think about the transition that we're going through as a society to more renewables, or at least to non-fossil fuels. You see the car companies doing it, you see the oil companies do it. It's happening. If everybody doesn't know that, it's happening. But when you see that type of transition, I think it becomes that much more important, right? That you are more inclusive in those type of practices, because that's how that actually happens. So, Shannon, I'd love to actually bring it back to you on this topic of, what do you think about that statement I just said? Like I hire for many different positions, and I am one of those people that I look at resumes, I look at background, I look at job fit. I do that first 15-minute interview. If you pass job fit, right? That's how I do my hiring practices. First 15-minute interview is a 6-second. By the way, there's this book out there called Who, W-H-O. I'm a big fan of that book, and it has a lot of great hiring practices, but it starts off with that first 15-minute intro conversation. And all you need to do for that is to have job fit. And then I get to know the person's background, what's important to them, motivations, what they like doing, what they don't like doing. And then it starts to become more about culture fit and diversity, et cetera. So I don't really look at race, creed, color, sexual orientation, obviously, at all. And then I don't even learn about that until that second stage of the process, and then can start assessing that. And so I'm just curious, Shannon, is your perspective leading Power Women? What is your perspective? Do you think that every open position should at least, look at least one female candidate, and bring them to at least the second stage of that process? Or is it more just fit, right? And it's just job fit, and no one should ever look at that.
Yeah, I think it could be a combination of the two. And I think finding the qualified candidates starts at a different level, right? I'm very fortunate to serve on a board through the Texas A&M University, where I went to college. They have a program there called TRIP. It's the Trading Risk and Investment Program, where we help students get into the program, find internships within the energy industry as a whole. And we struggle as a board to find qualified, diverse candidates who are even applying to the program. And so that's something that we're working with the university, of the outreach of finding those people that are qualified and should be applying to the program, right? I think it kind of starts at the bottom, and like with our students and like those new employees, and kind of training them and teaching them that they are qualified for these roles and that they should be interviewing and they should be applying. And so, yeah, I mean, females have done a lot in our industry. It's continuing to grow, but I think I understand why companies have to always look at the best fit for them as well, right? I mean, I think it's a twofold answer.
Jason, I wanted to build off your point.
Anybody can.
Lynn, I think I know the little bit of research you're mentioning. I think it also mentions that diverse teams also kind of avoid the phenomenon of groupthink versus, teams that look like each other, act like each other, talk like each other, do as one does. They're bound to have an essence of groupthink at one point. But from my experience, at least with diverse teams, you have various different perspectives, socioeconomic perspectives that are shaped by your subjective experience. So that kind of diverse group really helps in the long run in multiple practices, not just professional as well, school, society leading, culture fits as well.
Absolutely.
So true. I really appreciate everybody's answers in those questions. 2 questions came in from the audience that good good thing before we start, going to our last question, which will be wrapping this up. But Jennifer, somebody asked in the audience and said, can you tell us a little bit more about why and how you chose EDPR? A little bit more about that. I know you touched on it, so I don't know if there's more that you want to share, but just kind of maybe reiterate the point of why you chose EDPR.
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit in my introduction, but it was something that throughout my career, when I started in insurance regulatory law and then found my way into a passion for grid resiliency and sustainability, it was just important for me, if I was going to make the transition in my practice to something absolutely new, that I needed to be in a place where I felt comfortable in doing so. And I'm at a place in my career and my professional age where I just want to work for a company that shares the same values as I have. And I have the very great opportunity and privilege to be able to be picky about that. And so I did a lot of research on EDP before I joined the company. And like I said, it was really, for me, it was a former employee or a coworker that had joined EDP that really changed my mind or actually motivated me to join EDP. And we talked a lot before I did the interview process. And she was very complimentary about EDP and its mission. And there's a lot of renewables developers in the space. There's a lot of choices that you can make. But for me, it's the mission, sustainability, and also I like to like the people I work with, and I like to be in a culture where I feel safe to be in the workspace, and that is what EDP really commits to. And I have been able to grow a lot just in my personally and professionally by having that safe space at EDP. There's a lot of leadership roles that I wouldn't have taken but for my employment with EDP. So for instance, I am the co-chair of the Pride Synergy Group, which is our employee resource group for EDP. And I've taken a leadership position there, and we've done some really great things, internal initiatives and volunteerism out in the community in that role. And I've also been empowered to represent EDP also in industry roles. I will give a short plug for the new organization, Clean Energy Pride, which is a very just formed organization of LGBTQ professionals in the renewable energy industry who are coming together and creating kind of a networking and safe space organization for other professionals that are in our community. So without feeling the way that I feel and being safe and feeling like I can bring my authentic self to the workplace, I don't think those two opportunities would have been brought to me or that I would have taken them.
That's awesome, and just shows how important inclusion really is. I'll kind of move. We only have 5-10 minutes, maybe max here to go through the rest of this. So I know we're not going to get to everything we want to talk to about today, but I'll ask Lynn quickly. Louis had a question, and I think you can wrap 2 into 1 answer here, which is, what are any barriers that limit the ability to practice DE&I? What do you think some of those barriers are for companies to take on some of these initiatives, as well as what are any metrics, right? How do you know that these programs are being successful? If you can touch on both of those, I'd appreciate it.
Some of the barriers that limit our ability to practice DE&I, and this is just generally speaking, is the awareness around unconscious bias. I mean, can't start DE&I without that work. And that means people not being aware of their biases that really have an impact on hiring, retention, and creating an environment that promotes inclusion among all the employees. Leadership may be, lacking in terms of their commitment. As in the company. The other barrier may be, lack of goals and metrics around hiring, retention, and leadership accountability to DE&I. And just plain simple cultural resistance to, to DE&I. A comment may be, well, why do we need to talk about this? I don't see color, or I think everybody's the same. So it's those can be some of the barriers. At EDP Renewables, we are consciously tackling these barriers by active education and instruction. So for example, having a conscious inclusion training. Before I came, they were having unconscious bias training, and I continue that training and the education with conscious inclusion and what that means. Other examples is communication from leadership on DE&I, being a driver for our workplace culture. EDP has embedded inclusion in our strategy and our people narrative. And I also want to say there's accountability to our leadership team. For example, we have this is not the accountability piece, but our leadership team are executive sponsors for our ERG groups. And so they take commitment to that, and they take pride in really supporting our ERG members in these groups. The other thing that we've done is create an inclusive hiring guide that really is created to advance ED&I in our organization. It discusses bias, things like legally permissive interview questions and hiring recommendations. And so these are some of the things that giving you the barriers and examples of what we do at ADP to overcome those barriers.
Yeah, and learning and being self-aware, I think, as individuals is one of the biggest things. Again, minimum viable for companies. And metric wise, I heard, and I'll reiterate that I heard retention, right? And if you look at an individual and you look at a certain trend, and oh my God, wait a minute, why is my retention of my female people, right, less than my male people, right? Well, maybe there's an answer for that, right? So looking at certain metrics, I think is important. And so maybe as we get into the final question, you might just touch on that in terms of any other metrics that you think people should be looking at. But before I do, David, anything that you feel from a glass ceiling, like have you ever experienced that in retail energy based on your knowledge at all within the companies you've worked with? Do you feel like you've reached a glass ceiling based on, your background and mastery of the English language at one point in your career too, right?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to answer this in a different way. First of all, I learned a lot in this panel by hearing all the leaders talking about what they are doing in pushing for DE&I. And I do believe because leader like on this panel, the world is going to be a better place. I forgot who mentioned it, that we are really here to change the future, right? So I start by saying that. And then I will also say, as a first generation immigrant, I don't know, and I don't care what they said about United States. United States is a land of opportunity. You dedicate yourself, to pursue a passion. There are challenges all around, everywhere in the world. But if you can commit, dedicate, and focus, driving yourself to achieve the goal, you're gonna get there. And then once you get there, and maybe along the way you get there, try to think about the people behind you that's coming up. Try to think about your own experience and make the world a better place by helping the leader on this group and everywhere else pushing for this inclusion. Because I think this means not only good for the business by you able to hire, attract, and retain talents, but also when it comes to customers, and your own business expansion and development, it's only good because what was once mainstream has become very limited size. And if you look above and beyond what was once called mainstream, the market is huge. So that's how I would like to respond to your question that way.
No, that's incredibly helpful and truthfully appreciate that perspective. Shannon, anything that you wanted to comment in terms of glass ceiling before we bring this home?
Yeah, I mean, I reiterate a lot of what David said. I think that I will reiterate what I said earlier too about the focus. There are more women in our space than ever. It's really nice to see the TEPA events. Jason, you can attest, like it's definitely more diverse. There's definitely yeah, definitely an improvement there. But I think the advancement of where the women are in the industry is still also very important, right? And letting people know that you don't just have to be the analyst, you don't just have to be the support team, you don't have to be that. You have the opportunity to work your way up into those leadership roles. And our industry, like I said earlier, has been extremely supportive, at least of me and the other females that I am able to collaborate with. And we just want to keep that momentum moving forward.
I love that too. And I think, again, this glass ceiling approach, it's like when you look at a point in time, right, within a given industry, it could look like there is that glass ceiling, that there aren't that many senior vice presidents that are female or non-white male, right? And you're like, wait a minute, well, but it takes time, right? Those people, now that they're getting into the industry, they're gaining experience. And then as long as we're seeing progress, that's what I look for. Look for progress. The fact, like you just mentioned, those meetings at TEPA, way more diverse than they ever have been. And I think that has a lot to do with the inclusion piece. Let those people feel that there is a place for them within retail energy. And in fact, there are groups that you can go to and talk about those experiences and feelings and how you promote better that piece. And that's kind of the way that we're going to bring this home today and wrap this up. So I am going to ask for like one piece of advice you would have for the people that are on this call and that the hundreds that are probably going to listen to this on YouTube in their own free time. What advice do you have? We'll start with Lynn, for those individuals that want to be DEI advocates and aren't really sure how to start.
Well, if it's in your organization, you can start with having a conversation about, where we are with DE&I, where you are in your company with DE&I, and just a simple organization, simple conversation. The other thing I would say is get engaged with different organizations that's really promoting DE&I, and actively listen and be willing to learn, because this work is not just about one thing. It's not black and white, but it's about many things, and there's so much involved. And so I would say, start with a conversation at your company, with your manager, with someone, even with a coworker. How can if it's non-existent in your company, how can we start this? How can we start having a conversation around it, right? And if it's outside of your organization, get involved with organization and just start being, be curious about other people's experiences and backgrounds, just as you did, Jason. You grew up seeing the same people, right? But you knew that something within you said there's this doesn't represent the world that you live in. And so you took a step outside of that to go to school where there are other folks that you had never really experienced, and you learned about their experiences. And so that's my advice.
That's awesome advice. All in told, I appreciate it greatly. And thanks for the compliment always. Jennifer, I'd love your advice as somebody who obviously from an employee standpoint chose a company because of this mission, but let's say somebody's, not in a company that does everything that EDPR, what would you have advice for them?
Yeah, I think I'm going to piggyback off of a lot of what Lynn said. And also I thought one of David's comments was really poignant to me, and it takes a big act of bravery, but be you and bring yourself to the table, and be visible is the other piece of advice I would give to the community. If you're visible, you can join a community organization. You can be supportive in that way, and you can actively engage with your leadership at your company to set a positive example and really promote DE&I. I've done that in other roles in my career with positive results. So it just takes baby steps and a lot of bravery, and I congratulate all the leaders on this team that have done so.
Yeah, no, that's such an important part. Be brave, be you. I think it's interesting. I'm a huge fan of personality profiles because there is a really great depth of information that you can learn about how to speak to somebody, but it really puts people into 4 quadrants. Okay, like that's every NJIT, right? Myers-Briggs, DISC assessments, which we do at Enerex, right? any personality profile, maybe 8 buckets at most. That's every single human being. There's 330 million unique cases of people in America. That's how many people there are, and that's how many unique personalities there really truly is. So look at somebody as an individual, and I love that advice, Jennifer. Be you, be who you are, and be brave. Because if you are who you are and it's not the right fit and you don't feel welcomed in that company, wrong company, get out. Go to some place that you can really contribute, right? So anyway, great advice, reiterating it a little bit. David, bring us home. What advice do you have for, especially as we think about retail energy, right? I mean, I brought people on outside of retail and energy in general so that they could give some perspectives, but talk to people that are in our industry. You're in our industry. What do you think that those people should be doing to get started?
I think, echo Lynn's, listen and learn. Everybody brings value to the table, and do not quickly discount people's voice. Be open-minded and create that safe space. And I have seen what that safe space can do. It's a wonder. And I feel like if you are open, and again, internally having a conversation, be open-minded, listen and learn, wonder can happen.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Shannon?
Yeah, I think finding a group that you can ask questions to is really important. I ask a lot of questions before I decide to implement an idea or to create a new committee like Power Women. I went to other women. I asked, how do you feel about this? Would you get involved? Would you help? I went to the men leadership. Will you support this? Will you get your employees involved? Will you help fund this if that's the route we decide to go? And I think you have to believe in yourself. I'm really guilty of the whole imposter syndrome thing, right? Kind of faking it till I make it. And it took a while to get Power Women off the ground because I was scared to fail. I didn't want to start something that wasn't going to gain the momentum and get the support that I felt like it needed. And so, yeah, I think you have to find a way to believe in yourself and surround yourself with people who are going to support you and answer those hard questions and really help your vision grow.
You know, this is also great advice as I'm hearing it just for people in general for life, right? It's not just in terms of how you get, started, but it is that belief in yourself, but especially when it's something that is core to your being, something that is you and you can't change, right? Now, listen, we can all change our personalities. We can all learn how to talk better to each other. Those are all things we can change. Who we are, the experiences we have had today, the past, that is what it is. It's not changing. It happened already. So now the question is, how do you use that to your advantage? How do you believe in yourself that you can be you in all these companies going forward? And so anyway, I think you've gotten a lot of great advice, a lot of great examples. If there are any follow-up questions, you got some great panelists here. I ran out of time. What's new? Those who know me. But please bring questions. We're all here to answer any questions that you have afterwards. So as I bring this home, huge thank you to my panelists today. Again, EDP, very impressed at what you guys are doing to promote it as such a core standard. I think it's a great example for retail. David, what you guys are doing at EIQhome and really bringing technology to the forefront to be able to distribute, right, to all these underserved communities, a very easy way to enroll customers and to educate them about retail energy. Amazing. And Shannon, needless to say, everything you do to support our industry is appreciated. And I love being a part of your mission and really kind of doing everything I can to promote Power Women as well. Thank you for the compliments as well. It's greatly appreciated. So upcoming industry events in August, we have TEPA Illinois. If you didn't know, now you know. Outside of that, I want to share with you guys as well as an entire group in industry is that we at Enerex have the unique capability of working closely with DNVGL. DNVGL puts out a survey every single year to the broker community to understand a lot of different aspects. And so then DNVGL and Enerex will be running a webinar just like this to unveil those results. And you should be hearing from Enerex as well as DNVGL in the coming weeks, wrapping that survey up by end of August. And then either September or October, we will be doing that webinar. As always, if you are looking for Enerex to bring together the right people, you know we can. It's what we do. We bring together the world. And we're more than happy to take ideas and suggestions for future topics and webinars. So please do. With that, thank you so much to all my panelists. Appreciate you greatly. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day. And remember, again, I love that. That's how we're going to end it. Be you, be who you are, be unique, and lots to contribute with that diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks, Jason.